Can't let you guys go without hearing this thing, so let's crank it up. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is Beav Brody, and this is a 1994 NAS Defender 90 that we did an LS swap in about 6 years ago, which got it featured in Four Wheeler magazine. Now, I still get a lot of questions about this truck, and I built this before we were making a lot of videos and all that kind of stuff. So because I get these questions, I figured I'd walk you guys through all of the steps and all of the specifics and details on how we did this swap then, and I'm sure there's some things that have changed now. Now, before I started my current business, Tactical Baby Gear, we had a shop where I built Defenders primarily. That's all we did, and we've built some really cool, really high-end, fancy Defenders for big name people. And that's great, but you know those cars don't get driven. They're pampered, they're not as fun and exciting, and there's a lot of like really nice details. This is not one of those. It does have really cool details, but this was built as a utility vehicle to be used and abused and driven and to be durable. And here we are almost 7 years later, and it's still holding up strong aside from the battery that I just had to put in it, which is why it's here. So anyways, let's get into all the details. I'll show you guys exactly how we did this swap. I'm gonna give you guys some links as well to the resources and specific parts that we used, and I'll leave links down in the description below. So the engine that we used was out of a 2004 Tahoe or a Yukon. It was an SUV engine. This is a 5.3. This is not a 5.7 LS1. It's like the LQ9 or whatever that is. But we did swap out the intake manifold from the truck manifold down to the Corvette LS1 manifold because it's much shorter. We also swapped out the cam and the lifters and all that stuff, so it's got some sort of hot rod parts in there as far as that is concerned, and resealed things. We also had to use a lot of the Camaro and Corvette accessories. So the crank pulley, because it's tighter against the motor, doesn't stick out quite as far. We also used the car water pump, power steering pump, things like that. And speaking of the power steering pump, the accessories, we had to use a custom bracket. There's a CNC machine bracket to help package this in here to get the power steering pump up and the alternator in the right location, because a lot of times these accessory brackets put them in locations that were interfering with other stuff in the engine bay. So I don't remember where I got that bracket from. If I can find it still, I'll leave a link in the description. More packaging stuff to talk about. The motor mounts are custom. It's just like a universal motor mount kit that we modified and fabricated and all that kind of stuff. I did not take the transmission or the transfer case out of this truck when I did this, so I was able to bolt that stuff up, get this thing positioned, and then put the motor mounts in from there, keeping a nice driveline angle. The fuel injection system, we did not use you know, like the factory wiring or any of that kind of stuff. We used this MSD Atomic EFI system. It was cutting edge at the time. It was a brand new system. It came out that year. I'm really impressed with it now. I was really impressed with it then. It's worked flawlessly, no issues. The really cool thing about this is how neat the wiring is. All of the wiring and electronics route through the fuel rails, so you don't have a huge harness going all over the vehicle, and then there's just like a data cable that goes from the fuel rail to the small ECU that controls the whole thing, and there's like hardly anything to hook up. The other important thing about it is that the MSD computer also has the outputs that you need to go to your gauges and that sort of thing. You get your RPMs and all that kind of stuff comes out of that and goes to gauges. Now, we did put aftermarket gauges in this. We did autometer gauges, so like the water temp, the fuel level, and the RPMs are all autometer gauges, but looks very much like the original gauges and fit in the cluster nice and communicate well with all this aftermarket stuff. Up here, up front, the cooling system, the radiator. This was sort of a big deal to sort of figure out. We got this Griffin radiator. I think we ordered it from like Summit or something, but we made a bunch of measurements. We found something that worked, that had the inlets and the outlets in the right positions, that was a cross flow versus an up and down flow, etc. But if you make your measurements and know where your ports need to be, you can find custom radiators out there. And then we made these custom mounts for the top and used the factory radiator mounts up on top of the core support. And then we mounted a dual electric fan setup here behind the radiator to cool it. All right, underneath here, there's a few things to talk about and point out. One of them being the oil pan. First and foremost, make sure that you get the right oil pan and oil pickup tube that's going to put, I don't remember what this is from. I don't remember if this is the Tahoe pan or if this was from like a Trailblazer or what this was from, but it needs to be not a super deep pan, and it needs to have the sump in the rear. There's some that have a long sump and a sump in the front and all these different things, it has to clear this differential. So you need the sump to be small and in the back to fit over this sway bar and behind and next to the differential. Make sure you choose the right oil pan. So mating this engine to this transmission, we use this adapter plate from Mark's 4-wheel drive. A couple of things to know about mating this engine to this transmission with this adapter plate and making all of this work together. We had to machine a custom piece on the lathe for the clutch to take the, to space the release bearing out to touch the pressure plate of the clutch, because there's like this, you know, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch space now. So we had to space that thing out so they made contact. But it still uses the factory slave cylinder and the release bearing, but we had to space that thing out to touch. I think it uses the Land Rover clutch too, but it has a custom flywheel. It's a 153 tooth flywheel for Mark's 4-wheel drive that I think comes as part of this kit. And along with that 153 tooth flywheel, you have to use a custom starter, because most GM vehicles have a 168 tooth flywheel, and we're going down to 153 so that it fits inside this bell housing and works with the right clutch. The starter has to engage that smaller diameter flywheel. They do make starters that are 153 tooth, but most of them are straight bolt holes across. This has an offset bolt pattern in this block. So Mark's 4-wheel drive also makes that custom starter that has the offset holes that works for 153 tooth flywheel. That is a must have. Definitely get your hands on that. I think they sell that as a whole kit. I will leave a link in the description for all of that stuff. The exhaust under here, this was tricky and took us a little while to figure out how we were going to do it. I think we went through a couple sets of headers before we found the right set that would work for us. There's a few things to keep in mind. These are Sanderson headers. It's a short little header, and there's probably a better solution out there now, but at the time this was the best solution for us. The big kicker though was clearing this differential with the exhaust. So I had to make sort of a really tight turn off the manifold and then come down the side of the frame. And then we did sort of a Y pipe. I guess it's not really a Y pipe, but we just went 2 into 1 manifold. I think this is a Flowmaster manifold, or muffler, excuse me. And then it's a single out. And then, you know, you gotta go up over the differential and clear a lot of suspension components and, you know, keep it nice and tight. You gotta weave through a lot of tight spaces, but this thing sounds awesome. It sounds incredible. We'll crank it up in just a minute. Now, because we used the stock transmission, we were able to use the stock transfer case, the stock drive shafts. None of that stuff changed. I never took any of this out of the vehicle. It really could be resealed at this point. As you can see, a little drip here, but that's pretty typical Land Rover stuff and not anything that anyone's worried about. But we did suspension too. So we did, I don't remember, I think it was like a 2-inch lift kit, Terra Firma kit that we got from Rovers North, I believe. And the trailing arms and all that kind of stuff. It's cool, it rides great. We did these cool wheels with the bead locks. So these are true bead lock wheels. We did the spare tire as well. The one thing I'm not impressed with though, I noticed this earlier, is the bushings for these rear trailing arms are already split and cracking, and it's like a urethane bushing. They're only 6 years old. This thing doesn't have a ton of miles and use on it. Some, but I don't feel like those should be split and cracking and stuff already. So, for whatever that's worth. The fuel system, we talked a little bit about the fuel system up there, but we did in the gas tank, we pulled the fuel pump unit out of there, we replaced that fuel pump with, I believe, a Walbro 255 or similar type pump in there. And then I adapted that to an AN fitting, and we placed an inline fuel filter up here on the frame rail. And this is a GM, just a stock GM fuel filter that would be compatible with that motor. And he can get one of these at the parts store, easy. All right, let's move on to the inside and I'll show you what we did in there. Okay, so inside we really kept it original. We did touch up a few things and update some things. When we replaced the gauges, we replaced the instrument cluster trim bezel thing. We also replaced these door panels, I think, if I remember right. We also added this Tuffy lockbox center console, a radio mounts into it. It closes up. It locks, it's secure, that kind of thing, because this is a convertible. He has a little bimini top, but otherwise it's always open, which is, you know, it's dirty, but that's what it was meant to be used for. He takes this thing down to his boat and, you know, does whatever with it. We also replaced the seats with these Exmoor seats that I think we got from Rovers North. as well as the rear seat. We also bed lined the whole inside floor of this thing as well. So it's pretty bulletproof. This thing's awesome. This is my favorite Defender I've ever built, and we did the least amount of work to it. But I think I like it so much because it's so usable, which is, you know, what I talked about before with those ones that we built that were pampered and so fancy and all that, which is cool. But if you can't use it or you're not gonna use it, you know, what's the fun in that? So anyways, some of the other resources I wanted to mention to you that we got parts for this Defender, as well as some of the other ones that we've built, are, again, Rovers North. Great resource. They got tons of stuff in stock, super knowledgeable staff, a lot of stuff available on their website, etc. Fast shipping, straightforward guys, no issues there. Safari HP down in Orlando, Florida. Steve down there was an awesome guy, great resource, knows what's going on, can get you stuff from England if you need to or whatever. Again, all these things, the very specific things that I talked about that there are links for, I will leave in the description below. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Can't let you guys go without hearing this thing, so let's crank it up. Awesome. I love this truck so much. All right, see ya. Bye.